The Internet History Podcast is brought to you by MetaLab. Their slogan is MetaLab, we make interfaces. For a decade, MetaLab has helped some of the world's top companies and entrepreneurs build products that millions of people use every day. You probably didn't realize it at the time, but the odds are you've used an app that they've helped design or build. Apps like Slack, Coinbase, Facebook Messenger, Oculus, Lonely Planet, and many more. MetaLab wants to bring their unique design philosophy to your project. Let them take your brainstorm and turn it into the next billion-dollar app, from idea sketched on the back of a napkin to a final shipped product. Check them out at metalab.co. That's metalab.co. Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. Dan Maccarone is a digital design veteran, websites, products, strategy. In this episode, he shares some unique design lessons. He's got some amazing stories about the dot-com bubble, about the aftermath, and the rise of Web 2.0. And he also shares the story of the birth of Hulu, which I don't think anyone has really covered anywhere before. Quick note that we did have a recording issue about halfway through. Hopefully it won't be too noticeable, but thank you to Dan Maccarone for this great conversation. Dan Maccarone, thanks for coming on the Internet History Podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, by the way, I apologize. I feel like this is a year in the making. We've been trying to do this for a while now, but I'm glad we finally did.
Well, you've had on so many people I know and that I've worked with, so it's always it's actually a privilege to be a part of it.
Well, fantastic. I take anyone that has an interesting story to tell. So, let's do the sort of the usual bona fides at the beginning. I think you and I are almost the same age. I just turned 41 last week, but it looks
42.
42. There you go. So. We'll get to this in a second. We both came out of college right in the middle of the dot-com bubble. But you went to school originally, like I did, actually, for English, or although maybe you were English and performing arts. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
So did you have sort of a nerdy tech childhood at all? Or what was it that you thought you were going to be doing when you first went to college?
It's funny. I don't think of it as a nerdy tech childhood, though computers were certainly a part of it since I was probably, I want to say, 6 years old or 7. You know, think about like the 80s when the Apple IIe and Apple IIc came out. That was the first experience I had with computers, and my friends and I were on Montessori school, and we just like gravitated towards playing games on it, and even writing programs, like weird like programs you would download to a floppy disk, and we were in grade school. But I wasn't. I was much more in the line of like, I'm going to be a writer. You know, I'm going to write fiction. I'm going to be a novelist. And
that was me too. That was me too. And then right? I evolved because of Tarantino. I evolved into I'm going to be a screenwriter.
Oh man, I that came much later for me. But yeah, Tarantino was a great inspiration from like, you can do this in movies. This is amazing. I wanted to like write children's books. You know, I wanted to be a playwright, and it didn't matter. I just wanted to write, and creating things online seemed, or on the computer seemed tangential to it. What's funny about that is that when I was in about 5th grade, I think, my friends and I started our school newspaper, and we did it by there was a program on Apple IIc's, I think, called the Newsroom, that let you like lay out on newspaper. Mm-hmm. And so we all, like, I was the publisher or the editor, I forget, and we had a staff of people that we created, that we hired, and hired meaning, like, got to volunteer for us, who were all 5th graders and 4th graders, and laid out the newspaper ourselves. And that was, the closest thing you do to doing something online was designing a print product, and then, printing it out and Xeroxing it. So I guess that like design aspect of things has been part of my life the whole time, but none of that really culminated into online until I went to college and realized, the true story is that I didn't want to get a job, a summer job in college, and my mom wanted me to get a job at Walmart, and I did not want to work for Walmart, and it wasn't because I'm a snob in any way. I just didn't want to I didn't want to work at a store. I wanted to have a little more freedom. And a friend of mine had a print guide to Harvard, Tufts, and MIT. I'm from Boston, and he needed to do sales for him. And so my mom wanted me to work for Walmart. And so what I realized was that I had to take a drug test to get this job at Walmart. And I'm not a big pot smoker. Like I've always been like a wine drinker and whatever, but drinking is my vice, not pot. But I did smoke pot occasionally, and I had just smoked pot, and I was like, I can't take this drug test, I'm gonna fail. And my mom's like, well, you got to figure that out. And I was like, I'm gonna figure it out by not going to Walmart. And so I went to my friend's magazine job and or whatever it was, a guide job. And what we realized quickly was that this guide, it was called the University Guide in Boston, and it published menus and then like coupons to shops in Boston. And another friend of mine who worked there and I realized very quickly that it was garbage. Like we would take it from the mailbox they got at Harvard and throw it in the garbage. But the cool thing about it was that there were menus, and we should put the menus on the internet. And so our boss was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No one uses the internet. And we were like, well, as college students, we all have internet in our rooms, and at 2 a.m, you don't know where the pizza menu is. But if I can get online, that'd be great. And so he said to us, well, if you want to go do that as part of this, fine, you can own it, and I'll set up the server for you. And so we went out and sold the menus to restaurants for like $10 a month, and immediately, we had about 1,000 restaurants within 3 months that we were selling to put their menus online, and that lasted for like a year or so before we got rid of the company.
And what was the site?
And it was called citybuzz.com. And let me tell you something. The one thing that we did not know was actually how to build a website. And so after selling all these restaurants that were going to put their menus up, we were like, oh, we have to actually do this. And we ended up creating a dynamic, a website that was based off of Microsoft Access, through a friend of ours who did band websites in Boston. And it was this dynamic website in 1995 or 96 that was basically populating all these menus. It was such we didn't even know that we were doing something that most people didn't do at the time, because dynamic, populating from the database in 1995 apparently wasn't a thing. But it seemed much easier than coding 1,000 pages from scratch.
Then you did go for a little while, apparently, to Columbia to study journalism, right?
Yeah. I went after studying performing arts and English. I went to college, grad school for journalism. I think I only got in because I studied new media there, and it was it was 98, so the .com boom was rising, and Columbia had just started a new center for new media, and so I was concentrating in new media at J School. And I did really want to be a journalist. I did really want to be a writer, and I didn't think that my future was in product design or UX. I really thought it was going to be in journalism. Ended up actually doing an internship for the New York Times, and which led to a job offer of them to be an editor there in tech and entertainment for their syndication department. And then things took a different turn, which surprised me in the world of UX. But I can't. Your former guest, Elizabeth Oster, actually got me that job at the Times, and then actually tore me away from the Times to the dark world of consulting when we went to IXL together and started in the world of product design.
Well, explain that detour then. How did you go to what did you call it, the dark side or the dark world, whatever? Explain the detour.
Could be both of those, I guess. Yeah, I think it's in the dark world. But yeah, so I got this job at the Times. When you're a J School student and the New York Times offers you an internship, you take that. And my job was working on kind of designing the site for the Times and the news service and the syndicate. And and it's awesome. Like it was such a small team and at the time, and so they offered me this job to come on board. Basically, one day, a guy who had edited technology articles for the news service or for the syndicate had left, and the president of the syndicate was like, well, "We need someone to edit tech articles." And she was like, "Dan, you know something about tech. Do you want to do it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Sure." And so I took the job for when I graduated, and then Osder was like, "Well, I left the Times and I went to work for IXL, and we think you'd be a really good candidate to be an information architect." And I didn't know what that was at the time. I'd never heard of it. As far as I knew, like
actually,
I was a designer.
Just on the off chance that is jargon to certain listeners, what is an information architect?
Good question. So an information architect, or an IA at the time, as they were known, is someone who basically is creating the blueprints, or at the time was known as someone who created blueprints for the website. So if you think of it in the terms of like a house, you have an architect who would lay out the overall specs for what you're going to make and give you kind of a wireframe or a blueprint of how the house is going to be organized, what the size of the rooms are going to be, how many floors it's going to be, what the measurements are, even to what the design is. In some cases, architects and information architects will show you how your site is going to function without actually kind of putting that veneer of beauty on top of it. And that's not a discount to design, which does a lot more than that. But we're really showing you how things are going to work before the thought goes into what this is going to look like. And it was a very big field at the time. And I didn't respect it probably the way I should have when I first heard of it, because I had been doing what I considered design work, and I've been coding and doing information architecture all at the same time, well, realizing that I'm a terrible designer, and still am, and shouldn't be allowed to open Photoshop or Sketch to do that kind of stuff. And I'm not a great coder. I can understand coding, but I'm not a particularly gifted coder. And so I walked into this interview actually with a portfolio that's so embarrassing to think about now. But I walked in with this like portfolio of sites I had done in the mid '90s, because after we got rid of CityBuzz, we became consultants and did a bunch of independent websites, and then stuff I had done in grad school. And the person who was to become my boss looked at it and was like, "You should really become an information architect. You really understand how flows work and how people use the internet," without saying, to her credit, without saying, "But your design is terrible." And anyways, I got this job, and what I realized, and the reason why I took the job, is twofold. One is that it paid more, and I had student loans to pay off, and two was that information architecture to me, and now user experience, I guess is what it's known as, is the core of a lot of products. It defines how things are going to be coded, it defines how things are going to be designed, and it defines really, or translates the strategy of the business into an experience. And to me, that's what this is all about. It's like, I want to make things that are solving a problem, and I want to solve that problem in my head from a strategic standpoint first, but then I want to actually draw that. And
well,
that was really attractive to me.
It's the core. It's design at the core of products where everything is malleable. Like in actual tangible physical world products, you're working with physical materials, but in a digital space, like design is so core to everything, even like you're saying, business models or anything like that. Like, so in a digital world, like it's all design in a sense.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I think at the cusp of my like transition in my career at that point, I was just starting to realize that. And to fully kind of answer your question, I ended up taking that job and being the total, I hope I can swear on this, I was a total asshole.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Because I was 22, was graduating from Columbia, and turned down the New York Times, which I think made me a pariah in my class, because like, who doesn't go to J school and want to work for the New York Times? And I was like, no, I'm going to take this job. And instead, I actually became editor at large for the syndicate for about 5 years, doing freelance work for them. But more importantly, went into this job and learned, to what you said, like, learned that design is the core of product, and really cut my teeth on understanding, how strategy, how user research, how user behavior and business strategy need to work together. Maybe maybe in my career for better or worse, understand that those are not the same thing, and you really have to find a way to fit that square peg into a round hole, to create something that's going to be successful. And I definitely, like at IXL, which is the company I worked at the time, fought those fights, sometimes probably worse than I should have, but because I wanted to make something that people actually wanted to use.
And did you find out that you were actually good at it?
I think I found out that I had a talent for it, but if I look back on it, I certainly, what I learned better than that I was good at it was that I was better at it by working with other people on it. You know what I mean? Like, my most successful things I worked on there were with people who complemented my talents. So I had an art director there who was so good. He was one of my best friends to this day, actually. And like, he and I could work together and see things from a different angle, and make ourselves better and smarter about things. And I had bosses who had worked in other industries who weren't as technically or technologically proficient maybe as I was, or my friends were, who were a little bit younger, but they brought a business acumen that I didn't have at the time, and taught me that. And so, like, I was 22, 23, I thought I was a shit, and I certainly was not. I had an arrogance that I don't have anymore, but I had this arrogance because I worked in digital and thought I knew everything. And I knew some things, and I was good at understanding how digital design worked, but I didn't understand how the business world worked, or how to collaborate with people who had different talents. And that time at that consulting company taught me a lot about that, in a way that I certainly, needed. It also taught me how to work with clients and how to communicate better without assuming that people know the same things you do, because they often don't. They often bring things to the table that I don't. And so that ignorance on my part, I think, was certainly something I needed to learn to become better at what I do.
Well, so then the bubble burst, the nuclear winter happens, and especially here in New York, the nuclear winter is happening in things like advertising and digital media, and how do you sort of make your career out of the ashes of what's going on at that exact moment?
Man, so I left IXL and went to a company called Digital Club Network that was, as a 24, 25-year-old, was such a great job, because we broadcast concerts from around the web around the world, every night online. And I was a huge music fan, so I kind of ran the website part of that, and the design and UX part of that for a year, until they ran out of money because they had no business plan. But I kind of, made some money doing that, and then I got laid off, and started freelancing. And freelancing can be its own beast. And luckily, I had this experience kind of continuing to be a journalist at the same time I was doing UX stuff. And so I freelance wrote for a bit, and actually became like employee number one at an ad agency that I freelanced for, and then became an employee for. That really helped me weather that storm, weather that nuclear winter, doing a lot of work in advertising and marketing for media companies. So did a lot of work for Time Inc., for almost every publication there, and a lot of work for liquor companies. So we did Pernod Ricard's almost whole portfolio, from the Glenlivet to Chivas Regal to Seagram's Gin, Martell, whatever. And it's weird, because on one hand, I loved the fact that we got to be super creative and kind of sold in ideas around whatever we wanted. I was like, let's make this game with like Playboy and Chivas, or let's do a whole club experience from Martell. At the same time, I hated the fact that like everything we were making wasn't product. We're just making things that were going to be ripped down 3 months later. But it also helped me learn a lot about how to scope things, how to understand what it really takes to build things, how to manage a team, how to build a team, like all the things you need when you start making products, whether you're a startup or you're an agency. And that it's like this time where it's kind of bittersweet, because it's not something I really enjoyed, but it's something I really need to do get perspective. And I left that in 2000. I did that from like 2001 to 2000. I want to say 6. And in 2006, I left it and went to Razorfish and started really doing product again.
Right.
And that's
Okay.
when the web started rising up a bit more.
Right. Web 2.0 is coming, and Razorfish, who we've had several Razorfish alumni on, it survived. Avenue, it combined with Avenue A. I can never keep track of all of those different things.
Well, what's funny about that, Brian, is that like, so when I left IXL, I had this 5-year break, right, where I left and went to DCN and then went to this place called Rowan Warren, which is not going to fly, and walked into Razorfish in March of 2006. And IXL had merged with Scient, which then had got bought by SBI. And I guess Razorfish was part of that. And then it all got spit out as Razorfish in like 2005 or 2006. So when I walked into Razorfish in March of 2006, it's the same people I worked with 5 years before. Like literally, like I walked into a bigger company, but the best minds of the people I had worked with in 2001 are the same people I walked in and worked with in 2006. And it was like this homecoming. It was so wonderful and just embracing and happy. It was like walking to a happy place, you know?
Right. So then this is 2006. Actually, where's your LinkedIn? March of 2006, according to your LinkedIn. So this is when you first start to get to work on product specifically. Is it Hulu that's the first one, or are you starting to do other things before that?
So Hulu was the last one. I worked at first on some stuff for Ford. We made a bunch of games for them very immersive experiences for Ford. I think that's why they hired me, because of the stuff I had done with the liquor companies. And then quickly moved into a project with Simon Fuller, who was the creator of American Idol and the Spice Girls and whatnot. And then Hulu came along, because the same team who had worked on that project with Simon Fuller worked on Hulu, which was its own frustrating, but I think a fun experience.
Okay, wait. That's what we're here for.
Exactly. I figured as much.
So give me, and this is from your perspective, but your understanding of how the Hulu project came into existence, and then maybe also like how it came into your life and how you heard about it and got to work on it.
Sure, of course. So it's funny. One of my new clients right now is my former project manager from Razorfish, who managed Hulu, and we were talking about this the other day, and he was giving me his perspective on this. So apparently, and I guess this is a bit secondhand here, but he was telling me how the Razorfish wanted it, which was that they really wanted Razorfish. Like Razorfish is known for creating great experiences and great products, and I think that's part of because of the work we had done with the New York Times, we had done with CNN, and a lot of great media work. But it was less of a pitch and more of a, we want to work with you. Let's figure out how to make this happen. My involvement on it started with my former business partner, Kevin Carney, who was another UX lead and director at Razorfish. He and I had done iStars together, or whatever it was called at the time, which is the thing with Simon Fuller. And he was like, I want you to work on this with me. And and then I want the same team that worked on this music thing together. He's like, would you be interested in doing that? And I was like, that sounds great. Hulu is a 2-part kind of conversation. Part one is the first 4 months, which is NBC and Fox executives are trying to help define what this is with a bunch of people who are, used to making things in digital, and a bunch of people who are used to making things in TV. And those things didn't really go together. And so you had a bunch of developers and designers and UX people and project managers and account people. So it's consulting, it's product people, whatever, and TV people. And it was not, I would say, a particularly, I don't know, it was like oil and vinegar, I guess.
Well, real quick, because I'm assuming, and I could be wrong about this, but this is in response to the rise of YouTube. YouTube happens, people in TV and video and movies have seen the Napster example, and so all of these big media companies say this isn't going to happen to us, right? But then at the same time, then you've got the whole too many cooks in the kitchen designed by committee problem, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that YouTube certainly was a big factor, and as soon as NBC and Fox announced that this was happening, you had sites like TechCrunch or any number of tech, CNET, whoever, covering this, talking about these networks trying to create a YouTube killer, and that was the press, but that wasn't what we were talking about internally. We certainly were not trying to create a YouTube killer. In fact, I would say, well, I can't speak for NBC and Fox, but I can say that the design team and UX team that was working on this were trying to figure out something that YouTube wasn't doing, which was, how do you create an experience that is about people watching things for a longer period of time, right? Because YouTube was about watching things for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and we're talking about watching shows that are half an hour long.
Right, because so, again, I was running an employment blog at the time, and like the big headline I remember us doing was like, okay, you can watch The Office at work now in the office. You can actually watch TV while you're at work, and like that was the big thing, which seems silly now we can watch anything we want whenever we want on whatever device we want, but like that was the big revelation. It wasn't YouTube; it was actual real television wherever you were. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, and I don't want to get too much ahead of myself, but what you just said is exactly right. I mean, the mantra, or the kind of I don't want to say the tagline, maybe the log line that we thought about for Hulu as we were designing it was exactly what you just said: watch whatever you want, wherever you want, on whatever device you want. And you got to figure out, this was like 2007, right? So the iPhone was announced in January 2007. We started working on Hulu in, I want to say, like March of 2007. So the iPhone's not been out yet, but we had the sense that like, this is not about this short form consumption. It's about, this is a new way of watching TV, and on demand was already a thing. And just a little backstory, just why this is weird for me is, so my dad at the time owned a video store in Western Massachusetts, and he and this is Netflix is obviously a huge thing at the time. You could have cable on demand at the time, whether it be Comcast or Time Warner.
Well,
or
by the way, Netflix is a huge thing at the time, but still mostly as a DVD rental through the mail thing. Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah, absolutely. But the idea that the alternative to cable, the alternative to TV is becoming a bigger thing, and also, a lot of networks already had streaming services. You could watch ABC online on abc.com at the time. I mean, it was a terrible experience. It was a shit experience for a lot of reasons, technology aside, UX-wise, whatever. But it existed, and you could certainly do it. So what happened, was that we spent a good 3 or 4 months doing design by committee, like you mentioned, and the problem was that none of us really understood what consuming long form content was. And I looked at the early, I still have these wireframes on my computer, like the early designs and wires for Hulu were terrible because we were looking at YouTube, and we were looking at the fact that it's not about what you're watching now, it's what you want to watch next, right? YouTube's whole business is about watch the next thing. And that makes sense when you're looking at something that ends in 30 seconds or a minute and a half from now. But when you're looking at an episode of Law and Order or whatever it is you're watching, you don't want to watch next. You want to see this. You want to watch this, and then when the credits start rolling, what are my next options if I want to watch something else? And the good thing is, this is over a decade later, so we don't have to be political about it. A lot of the network executives just had shit ideas because they didn't understand digital. And they would come to us with ideas, and me and Kevin, who was the co-lead on this project with me, he and I would go to our project manager or our account manager and be like, this is not a good idea. This is a terrible idea. And they'd be like, well, they're going to pay us extra money, so you should just do it. And we're like, this is awful. And this led to a bloated product. I think about product a lot, especially someone who helps launch products, and they were MVPs and first versions, and we just kept adding and adding and adding, and this thing was getting to a point where we're like, if this launches the way it is, A, it's going to make the internet a worse place, and B, all the tech blogs are just going to laugh at us, and so will everyone else. And it was embarrassing what we had designed. It got to a place where I forget what the number is, but the wireframes for this thing were, somewhere in like the 150 to 200 page deck of wires, and then you had this prototype that was literally, I wouldn't say it was a YouTube knockoff. I look at it now, and there's still some things about it I really like, but it definitely wasn't about engaging you. It was trying to like get you to watch the show while you're doing other things. So you're, trying to pop up video it by looking at trivia about it, or you're looking at the cast, whatever it is. It wasn't about
the whole VH1 pop-up video thing. Right. Yeah.
Like let's make it interactive. And that wasn't right. It was totally not right. And what changed everything was when NBC and Fox hired Jason Kilar to be the CEO of the company. I think Jason's a brilliant guy in many ways, and I had my reservations because he came from Amazon, and I was like, but Amazon's not TV, or Amazon's not video, right, at the time. I think, again, 2007. But he understood digital, and that became really interesting because he came in, and I remember he sat down and he talked to all the people on the NBC side and the Fox side and the Razorfish side, and I remember he had this like the stack of the wireframes, and he was like, "How do we get to this?" And Kevin and I at some point being like, we'll tell you. We were done, by the way. We were ready to quit our jobs. Like, we were so embarrassed by what this would look like. We were just like, who fucking cares anymore? And we're like, we'll tell you why. And we told him why everything that he had in front of him was, useless. And I get the details of this wrong a bit, but I always want to say it's the next day, but I don't think that's true. But like within a week, he basically got rid of the entire Razorfish team and got rid of the NBC and Fox team, or at least he was managing them himself and not with us, and made us all, me and Kevin and another designer of ours, or a friend, not a designer of ours, a designer for Razors, move to LA and start from scratch. And this is probably like late June, early July of 2007. Mm-hmm. And he was like, look, we're going to start over, and we're going to get this thing done in 8 weeks. So we had some good ideas that were piggybacking off of research we had done. And some of that research was that people wanted to be able to focus on their shows. And, it's funny, you said earlier, we can watch TV at work now. One of the things that we had thought about was the idea that people might be watching this at work. And this is like something we had heard from research about people watching YouTube at work, which is that they had to always kind of hide their browser from their boss. And so we thought, well, what if you could pop the video out? So like it would be in the corner of your screen. And if you wanted to like cover that quickly without having to worry about your browser, you could do that. And so that's where like popping out the video came from. We had bad ideas like search. One of the search things we came up with was, we're going to create a great search system that if like you wanted to watch something in comedy, you could filter by type of comedy or actor or whatever, which makes a lot of sense, except that Hulu launched with 25 shows. And with 25 shows, comedy aside, filtering is useless. Another example would be, and this is actually my favorite example of anything we came up with, because it's such I think a good UX solution and not a good business solution, but actually turns out to be one, which is towards the end of the design process, we were sitting in Jason's office, and it's me and Kevin, Eric Fang, who was the CTO, and Jason, and we would have these daily stand-ups just going over, what are we working on today, because we were working in sprints. And Eric was, if I remember this correctly, Eric was like trying to just check off a box and like, okay, so let's say someone comes in and searches for Lost. And at the time, we didn't have Lost, and Lost was a popular show. What do we show them? And the knee-jerk reaction in the room was, well, we'll show them other sci-fi things, Star Trek or whatever. And everyone in the room's like looking around at each other like, that doesn't feel right. Because if you go back to what we were talking about before, the general kind of mantra around Hulu was watch what you want, when you want, where you want. And, like telling you to watch Star Trek here does not fit into any of those categories. And so we're like, what do we do? And I honestly don't remember who it was in the room who said it, but someone was like, well, what if we just told them to go to abc.com, just because where Lost was. Mm-hmm. And so for a moment, everyone in the room was like, but we all agreed that that was the right idea. Like if you want to watch TV online, Hulu is the place to come. And so if you search for Lost and we don't have it, we should still be able to tell you where you can watch it. So the next time you want to watch something, you'll still come here. And you probably won't even realize that you're going to ABC. We can design it in a way that says, yeah, go watch it at ABC.com. You click on the link and we link you to that show and you're at ABC and everyone's happy. But Hulu is the place you came to. And Jason embraced this entirely. He was like, yes, let's do that. We'll get it past the network brass and we'll do it. And we did. And so when you watched Hulu and you wanted to watch Lost, we showed you to the right place to watch it. And to me, that's like the most successful thing about the product. I mean, there's so many things I love about that product, but I love the fact that like we were able to do the right thing for the consumer and solve that problem for them. And ever since then, you know, honestly, that is like my favorite lesson I've learned. For anything I've ever done since then, I always think back to that, like, what is the right thing? And can we make this a better business because we're doing the right thing for the consumer? And the right thing is giving them what they want and helping them solve a problem. And that is, to me, the epitome of just that one thing, the search results for Hulu, that was like a proud moment in, like, you know, UX and I don't know, design history for me.
Well, also philosophically, it's not treating the user like an idiot because, okay, you don't have it. What are you supposed to do? You like pretend like you don't and lie to them? No. If you don't have it, hey, we don't have it. Here's where it is. Like, it's not like they don't know it doesn't exist, you know, so like don't pretend like it doesn't exist.
And most of the time they're going to go to Google anyway. Let's be honest. Like if you ever do any user research, the first place people start is Google. So if you can get them to come to Hulu and even back then and search for a show, like why not be as transparent as possible? In life, that's a good idea. And on the internet, it's always better to be transparent anyways, even with the show you're looking for. So yeah, it was a great day. It was a great, like I didn't want to be in LA. I didn't want to be there I was getting married at the time. Like everything was miserable. And I was like, this is a win. This is an awesome thing. And it worked. Can I tell you one thing about,
Sure.
about that Hulu thing? So I don't know, you work in tech. And so you kind of understand this. Like no one knows what we do. You know what I mean? Like no one understands what we do. And I just said before, my dad owns a video store at the time. And I go home for Christmas that year. So Hulu launched in like November, I think, or whatever it was. And I go home for Christmas, and my sister comes up to me, and she's like, "Danny, you work in the internet?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." She's like, "Dude, I gotta tell you about this site I found. Oh my God, I'm at work the other night, and I want to watch my show. I forget what it was. I want to watch my show, and one of my other nurses, all my sisters are nurses. One of the nurses points to the site, and I could watch my show on the internet. And I was watching it on the browser there, and like, holy shit, Danny! Like I could watch it. Like, have you ever heard of that? And I was like, where are you watching it? And she's like, I was watching it at a site called Hulu. And I was like, oh yeah, I know, I've heard of it. She's like, damn it. She's like, I thought I had it on you. I thought I had it. Like, how did you hear of it? I was like, oh, I made it. And she punched me so fucking hard in the shoulder. She's like, shut the fuck up. No, you didn't. And I was like, no, I did. My friends and I, you know, I mean, I don't own it. I was hired. I was paid to do it. But yeah, we made it. And she's like, so that's what you do. And I was like, yep, that's what I do. It was like it was such a fun, like only time in my life my family understands what I do.
Yeah.
And my dad wasn't happy, by the way. My dad was like, oh, you made that? Cool.
Well, but it didn't strike his fancy. My dad didn't get the internet till he could buy his 70s stereo equipment on eBay. Like real quick, two quick questions about that design process. Were you guys conceiving of mobile, and also were you guys conceiving of this on any screen? And the reason I'm asking is obviously the reality that we're now living in, where, you know, I expect to get Hulu on any TV I buy, on any tablet I buy, on anything I buy. So when you're designing this, were you designing with that sort of universe of screens in mind, or was that too early?
Definitely too early. I mean, you got to figure the iPhone was released in June of 2007. We moved to LA to do this in July of 2007. So YouTube did have an app on the iPhone when it first launched. But the idea that this would be a main consumption place, and the iPad wasn't out yet, took 3 more years for that to happen, wasn't a consideration. What's funny is that we were using the iPhone for so many things while we were there. We were like living in LA, we were New Yorkers, so we know our way around. So the iPhone, like Google Maps at the time was the default application. We were just using that to get everywhere. And so it became like such a good tool, but we didn't think about it. Like designing for mobile, it wasn't even a part of the conversation, to be honest with you. I think that.
Well, and you know what? The reason that I'm asking that in this way is that forget mobile. The paradigm we're in now is that people are going to watch it where they're going to watch it, right? On whatever screen, and maybe even not a screen at this point. We could be entering a world where they're watching it in VR or some stuff. So the idea of, as you're designing media, and you were talking about how, like, well, they threw out this team because it didn't work, they didn't get digital. Like, could you have conceived of the world that we live in where it's like, this has to translate, the experience has to translate whether I'm on a tiny screen, if I'm laying back on my couch, if I'm on a train or whatever? Like, what are any sort of lessons that from that design experience and from that time maybe could take us to today?
Well, what's funny is we certainly were thinking about the fact that you could be watching it on a train or on your laptop. But that was definitely how we thought about it, is that you're looking at this not on your TV, but you're looking at it as a, I don't know, what do you call it, like a 2-foot experience, whatever that would be. But here's what's really interesting, at least I think it's interesting, in what we were wrong about when we launched it. And this is something we found out, I would say 2 years later or so, after we left Razorfish. Kevin and I started this company called Color Candy Shell, but we started doing a lot of research in media and doing more ethnographies. And what we found in like 2009 or 2008, whatever, doing ethnos was that people were not watching Hulu on a 2-foot experience. They were watching it on a 10-foot experience. So Hulu didn't want you to watch this is the time, this is different now, but at the time, they didn't want you to watch Hulu on your TV. They wanted you to watch it on your laptop or on your desktop, and that's what we were designing it for. But everyone we talked to in research, and this is like, I would say, I don't know, it wouldn't be unanimous, but it would probably be like 80% of the people we talked to, and we're talking non-tech forward thinking people. We're talking regular, people in suburban America who just happened to subscribe to Hulu. They were going to believe this, like a Radio Shack, with their laptops, being like, I signed up for Hulu, I want to watch it, but I don't want to watch it on my computer. I want to watch it on my TV. How do I do that? And like learning how to like hook up, not that it's hard, but learning how to hook up with an HDMI cable or a VGA cable, their computers to their TVs, so that they could watch Hulu or Netflix at the time also on the bigger screen. And this is like pre like Apple TV being a big thing or whatever. And that was the most surprising thing to me, was that at the time, forget about going small screen, people were still trying to take this thing to a big screen. And so the idea of pre-thinking how mobile was going to be a factor, it wasn't a mindset. In anything we were designing, I would say 2007 to, I don't even know, 2010, mobile was and also not a yes or a priority. That shifted significantly, I would say, 2008, 2009, when the App Store became a bigger thing, and as Twitter grew and social grew, where things were being clicked on to watch, on the web. But no, I don't think any of us thought about it. Especially in designing it, because like it wasn't a part of our daily life. I would say that big shift came in like 2009, 2010. You have all, thousands of apps out there in 2009 at that point, bigger things happening. And now all of a sudden smartphones, because Android's out at that point, then that shift really that shift really came into thinking about design right. That doesn't mean we weren't doing it before that, but but the consideration being a big factor for, we worked on Juiced as well, which, even then wasn't part of mobile thinking. I think when we were working on SNL in like 2008, maybe that was, we started thinking about mobile. I know we did mobile designs for that, but in Fallon, definitely in like 2009. But yeah, nothing before that for sure was a big part of it.
I do want to talk about your comedy stuff, but real quick, Foursquare, because designing like that to me is an example of a company that almost conceptually has changed what it was many times in its existence. And so, just tell me the work that you did with Foursquare, and maybe sort of any philosophical or conceptual lessons there.
Well, I would say, if I can start, the conceptual lesson or design lesson there is the idea that you really can't chase your competitors. You have to embrace your vision. And Dennis as a founder, he had a vision. Dennis, I think he's grown in what he wants and wanted Foursquare to be. But what he tried to start with Dodgeball, which was a mobile product before smartphones existed, where you would text in, "Hey, I'm at this bar," and it would go out to your friends who were also part of Dodgeball. Is obviously the basis of Foursquare. He really wanted that social gaming thing to be a thing. And so for us, working with him was to translate that vision to make it better. My experience with Foursquare was twofold also. One was that before Foursquare ever launched, there was a beta of it, or maybe an alpha of it, in New York, really, really early on, before they launched at South by Southwest in 2009. So like maybe December to March in 2009, at 2008, 2009, where we were it wasn't designed. It was something that him and Naveen were doing and just pounding it, just to find the bugs, like they were really trying hard to get it out there for South by. Our design chops came in, after South by, after they got some funding. It's really funny because Kevin, who I had mentioned before, and I worked in Hulu, had formed a company at that point called Hard Candy Shell that we started in 2007, right after the Hulu project ended at Razorfish. And Dennis was a friend of ours, and we were sharing, it was a great office. We were sharing office space with Curbed, Eater, Racked, which was that network, and then Hard Candy Shell, and then Foursquare moved in. And they were like, we were giving them desk space. It was just Dennis, Naveen, and Harry. And they got funding finally, I think from Fred Wilson or whoever initially funded them. And they hired us to really, bump up their UX, bump up their design to be a little bit more professional, because they were using like iOS native stuff before. And the biggest lesson of that project was that was trying to focus Dan, because Dennis was dealing with a tremendous amount of pressure. Like he had, I think what was it, but was it Fast Company or one of the companies had put him on the cover as like the new king of social media. And he was growing a team, and our job wasn't just to be designers for him. It was to be, people who he could fall back on, and not fall back on in a bad way, like who he could rely on, and who he could listen to, and who could calm him down, because he was doing a ton of stuff. And so what happened is Koala launched at the same time at South by, and Koala was basically the same type of premise, which is I could check in here and tell my friends where I'm going. And it looked like, what do we do? Like, do we compete with them directly? They had certain features that Foursquare didn't have, and vice versa. And our job was really to focus in on, like, what is the Foursquare vision? And if anything, that helped make our design process better. Like, in the end, it was all about simplicity. Like, make it easy to check in, make it easy to find the places, make it easy to find friends. That stuff, I don't want to say was rote, but it was certainly easier than ensuring that we didn't have some weird feature creep and scope creep that we could have gotten into because of worrying about the competition. And that's not to discount the work we did on Foursquare. I'm really excited about the design stuff, and Mari, who is the designer on that, it was brilliant on everything she did. But I do think it was about, let's reel you in, let's rein you in, and make sure that we're really focusing on what you need to have in this whatever 1.1 or 2.0, we want to call it, to make this product great. And I think, you know, he embraced that quite a bit, and as they grew their team, you know, they did too. But yeah, I think to me that was the biggest product lesson. And I'm not trying to like discount the work. The work is great, and it was part of that product for, you know, 2 years or whatever it was. But the hard part was making sure that we really focused on making the right choices for Foursquare, as opposed to, you know, making it more complicated than it needed to be.
The comedy work, you know, Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, Saturday Night Live. Now we are in the era of not only mobile, but things going viral and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any design lessons there in terms of either virality, or maybe this even brings us into the modern era of consuming clips and content and things like that?
Well, I would think that, you know, when it comes to content, design kind of has to get out of the way. Does that make sense? Because we do a lot of work in media, and SNL and Fallon being no exception. Like, you have to let the content be the hero, and that's true in fashion too. Like, in anything where people are like trying to focus on something that they're excited about, and it's certainly rarely your design. You know, it's about that sketch that SNL did, or that dress you want to wear and not to wear, or whatever. And with SNL, you know, our thing was about let people find the content they want, that they're excited about. So you'll never see the stuff that we did online for SNL, but if you download the app, the information architecture, the UX of it is exactly the same, which I think is thanks to Gavin Purcell, who was the producer for the Tonight Show for a while, but he worked with us a lot in the SNL stuff and helped make that happen. And with SNL, and this is what's great about viral video, is that if you want to go find the thing that was on SNL on Saturday night, let's make it easy for you to find. But if you want to go find that video of Lazy Sunday from whatever it was it 2005 maybe, like 14 years ago, you can go find that. If you want to go find something that happened in the 80s, we can help you do that. It's all, and I think what we learned with SNL and Fallon as well is like, let's be twofold with our design. Let's, on one hand, let you find those things, and then let's be serendipitous too, because comedy can be so serendipitous. And with Fallon, it was about, let's create an app that showcases the show but gives you its own experience. We had a whole thing with the app we designed that was about Jimmy Fallon's phone, where you could have like really like little mini apps inside of it that could be their own special Fallon experience. With the SNL stuff, it was, you know, Lorne Michaels says that he can tell how old you are by who your favorite SNL actor is, or cast member is.
Cast member, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, I remember sitting across with him and talking about this, and I was probably 30, let's say I was 32 or 33 at the time, and the guy next to me was like 25. And I think my favorite cast member may have been like Dana Carvey or something, and the guy next to me's favorite cast member was like Will Ferrell, and he's like, okay, you graduated from high school in 93. I was 94, but he was close enough. And he was spot on, you know. And so like design, like I think the accessibility there is saying, you know, you have a vast audience, so you have to make this accessible for virality or not. And that's true in entertainment, that's true in news, that's true in anything. You have to understand your audience and how you're gonna make it relevant to them, you know, and that's not just true in a home screen of an app, that's true in however someone's going to access something to you online.
So to wrap up, your Charming Robot you're still doing this stuff today at Charming Robot, and by the way, doing this sort of design stuff for friends of the pod like Rafat Ali at Skift, WeWork. Also, by the way, the thermometer Kinza got.
Yep.
But I have two kids. I know the Kinza.
Did you have Kinza on the pod? Did you have Kinza?
No. I'm just saying I've used the hell out of some Kinzas over the last 4 years.
Oh, I love that you keep naming things that we have equity in. I mean, we own part of Kinza. We own part of Skift. I wish I owned part of WeWork. Man, Kinza. God, I got to tell you, man. I don't know if you like Kinsa is one of my favorite things I've ever worked on in my life.
Mm.
And it's not the most famous thing in the world, but it is by far the project that I'm.
We should let people know this is a digital thermometer for little kids, essentially.
Yeah, and my kid uses it too. And gosh, can I tell you that story quickly? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Um, when Inder came to us, this is probably, I want to say it was late 2012 or late 2013. I forget the exact year, but they had a breadboard of the thermometer and like a thermometer with like a baggie over it, so you could take your temperature.
Let me interrupt real quick. I said digital
Sure.
thermometer. What I mean is this is a thermometer that is digital that it also will connect to your smartphone. And so when your 6-month-old is whatever, you can get the reading, you can compare it to, well, at 3 a.m. it was this, and like it keeps track. Like it literally is a fantastic product. But sorry, go on. I just wanted to so that people can understand what we're talking about. Yeah.
Like that, makes like my heart grow like 3 sizes too much more. Like, yeah. So they came to us with this idea and this prototype, and the whole idea when we first launched it was to help young parents deal with the stress of understanding what their child's illness might be. And you're a parent as well. I am as well. I wasn't at the time. But when you're a parent, your child is sick. Whether they have the sniffles or they have the flu or something worse, like you don't know, and just taking their temperature is a stressful situation, and that's one of the things we were trying to solve, or Inder was trying to solve, and we were trying to help them with. And we were like, how do we do that? And so originally it plugged into your iPhone headphone jack, and what we were trying to figure out a few things. One was, how do we calm the parent down? And the second thing was, how do we calm the kid down? And so we went through all these, brainstorms where we're like, okay, as a parent, you really care about the results. Like telling me that my kid has a 99.3 degree temperature does mean zero good. I don't know if that's good or bad. Because, by the way, 98.6 is the average. That's not what we all are at 98.6 degrees. Like everyone has a different average temperature. So when I only need context, do I need to call the hospital? Do I need to do something else? Like what do I do? At the same time, taking your temperature of a kid is tough because they don't want the thermometer in their mouth, or in Kinsa's case, under their armpit or in their butt. And that is something that Kinsa does. You can go at any of the orifices that you need to do. And that's, by the way, designing for that's interesting too. But we had to figure out how to distract the kid. And so we had to create this interface that we had the sound design, visual design, and we developed branding and naming for Kinsa as well, like make this feel like a warm, embracing product that parents and kids could both do. And it makes me so happy to know that you use it because, that was the barometer of success. Was like, can we do that? And now, it's been 5 years or so. The goal initially was to do that, and the bigger goal was to map the health of the world. And 5 years later, we are in schools all over the country. We are in CVS and Walgreens and Amazon, and we're not just helping parents individually. We're able to tell people like, hey, in your school, in 5th grade, this particular class has, strep throat going around. And you have a kid in 5th grade and you have a kid in 3rd grade. 3rd grade's fine. 5th grade's not. You might want to keep your kid home or whatever it is. And that to me is like so the beauty of the internet. It's so everything we've been working for with data and design to be a friendly place where like we can use technology to help you in that small moment when you need to know what to do. Should you call the hospital? Should you call a nurse? Should you just put your kid to bed? And those big moments where it's like, oh, there's an infestation of lice, or lice is not a good example, like a strep or the flu in a school in a district. And Kinsa, I think, has been able to do both those things. And gosh, man, I could not be more excited for them and more excited to be a part of that team than anything else. Like it may not be a household name yet, maybe it is, but like Hulu, Went the Runaway Foursquare, they're great and I love them. But that's the thing, like you're making a difference when it's helping people on that level.
Well, it's also you're talking about how it's technology, and I agree that it's technology making the world better. But um, that's also a testimony to why design is so powerful, because anyone, well, not anyone, but you can always make a better mousetrap or design a better widget or something, but then
Yeah.
it takes extra work to then design it to make it applicable and useful and delightful and hopefully world changing and things like that.
Yeah, sure.
So that's a beautiful place to leave it. Dan Maccarone, thanks for remembering all that for us, and again, like ending with like a really powerful a treatise on why design can change the world. If you like what you've heard on this episode, please support us by subscribing to the podcast so you can get great news stories and conversations every 2 weeks. And please buy the book that was based on this podcast, How the Internet Happened, From Netscape to the iPhone, by me, Brian McCullough. Order it now wherever books are sold. How the Internet Happened. And if you weren't aware, I host a daily tech news podcast every weekday that comes out at 5 p.m. In that show, I tell you what happened that day in the world of tech. It's only 15 to 20 minutes long, and it's great if you love tech news. Search your podcast app for Ride Home to find the show. It's called The Tech Meme Ride Home. Thanks.